December 7th, 1941, the unthinkable happened. In a surprise attack, Japanese warplanes decimated U.S. military forces in Pearl Harbor, killing nearly 2,500 Americans. Although unknown at the time, this atrocity was only the beginning.
The general feeling was that Pearl Harbor had been bombed, but the American Navy had chased away the Japanese. So believing that, no one was too concerned about what the Japanese would do in the Philippines until they hit us.
Hello, this is Bert Simon speaking from Manila, and this time I've got a real scoop for you. Manila has just been bombed. In fact, right now it is being bombed. And without warning.
The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor at dawn on December 7th, and that's 3 o'clock in the morning, December 8th in the Philippines. MacArthur's people were alerted, but they weren't ready.
And we were standing there applauding the planes. We didn't know there were Japanese planes, and all of a sudden, rat-a-tat-tat with them 50-caliber machine guns, and we grew up pretty quick.
The war that once seemed so far away suddenly became very real, and paradise was forever lost. Within months, it was clear that defending Manila was futile for the unprepared and untrained troops. To survive, MacArthur ordered his men south to the Bataan Peninsula.
Just prior to the Pearl Harbor attack, the U.S. forces were behind the times. Even the U.S. infantryman was equipped with World War I era arms and equipment. Japan looked down on the U.S. as being inferior.
There was no comparison between the fighting power of the Japanese that landed in the Philippines and the ill-equipped, undertrained Filipino and American force under MacArthur. The Navy didn't have any ships. The Air Force didn't have any planes. So they made infantry units out of these guys.
I remember one morning they fell in a platoon of 31st Infantry soldiers, and the first thing the first sergeant said was, "Now does everybody know how to load their rifles?" And that was kind of scary.
American forces struggled to keep from being crushed by the Japanese. But with virtually no outside support, supplies and strength were dwindling. It seemed they had been cut off.
We lived on rumors on Bataan. Every day there was a new rumor about hundreds of planes are coming and the troops are coming.
Even the president himself was stating the largest convoy ever assembled will be headed for the Philippines, and assistance is on its way. We didn't see any medicine or clothing or ammunition or weapons coming in that we finally figured out that, hey, these things are rumors. We're not going to get anybody.
A decision was reached in 1941 to take on Hitler and company before worrying about the Japanese.
Europe came first because until they destroyed Hitler, they figured that they couldn't fight a two-front war on the scale necessary to win it.
Because of a certain decision that was made, 8,000 or 9,000 miles away, these men in the foxholes of Bataan would pay the ultimate price.
General MacArthur really believed the United States was sending reinforcements to the Philippines. He then passed that word down to his troops, who believed him. And of course, when it didn't happen, then MacArthur became the villain.
President Roosevelt decided that if MacArthur were captured or killed in the Philippines, it would be very bad for the American public. So he ordered him out in March 1942, and MacArthur went south down to Australia.
I said to the people of the Philippines, I shall return.
Making matters worse, an already diminished food supply was being shared with thousands who had fled the cities. If the enemy didn't kill them, starvation would.
Some days we went 3 days without a bite of food. When we're fighting down there on the west coast of Bataan, the trucks would be robbed by our own people before they ever got to us. That's how bad it was food-wise on Bataan.
And we were looking for rats. We were looking for anything that moved. It didn't make any difference. Eat it, man. It's protein. incredible.
We've eaten all the horses, we've eaten all the monkeys, we've eaten all the big worms, we've eaten everything there was to eat. How, tell me how, are we gonna say we can win next month?
The men were so weak that any disease would take hold. They had no recuperative powers. If you put a guy under anesthesia to operate on him, he'd probably die on you because he didn't have any strength left. The average Joe was mentally defeated, worn out, sick, had malaria. They knew they weren't going to get off Bataan.
MacArthur's departure left General Edward King in charge. Disease and death were on the rise. And with no sign of help, it seemed there was no way out. After just 1 month, he faced an agonizing decision that either way risked thousands of lives. Facing insurmountable odds and certain defeat, King defied orders and commanded his troops to lay down their arms.
He had an emaciated, ragtag group of soldiers who might have had the will to go on, but the wherewithal wasn't there.
General King had guts enough. When faced with two bad choices, either let his people get massacred or surrender them, he chose to surrender them.
He didn't want to surrender, and neither did any one of the men I know want to surrender.
It's almost as if the war is going to be over. We're going to get medicine, we're going to get fed, we're going to get clean clothes, we're going to have a place to sleep. Everything was that way until you got off by yourself. You stopped really and to think of that word. Surrender.
Up next, suddenly in the hands of their enemy, American POWs learn that surrender does not necessarily mean